is the devil's greatest trick, making us believe he doesn't exist. Good and evil may exist on Earth, but when it comes to proving their agents affect human behavior, happy endings are more easily found preceding movie credits than following jury verdicts. In 350 years, the American legal system has evolved from a colonial practice of seeing Satan behind the evil, but punishing the defendant nonetheless, to a modern belief that people are responsible for their own actions. The insanity defense is a narrow exception to this rule, and judges and jury are wary of those who attempt to avoid punishment by acting first and pleading insanity later. Although an insanity defense and a prolonged stay in a mental institution may seem like a better alternative to a lengthy or lifelong prison sentence when trying to meet the burden of proof, always remember that with the insanity defense, the devil is in the details.
I don't think anyone has a right to take the life when I'm under
Welcome to the Sinful Show. I am your host, Father Sin. Falling a little bit behind, but that's life. Sometimes you just gotta suck to embrace, and it's up to you if you decide to spit or swallow. Things have been very hectic here in the Sinful household, but nonetheless, I've brought you a pretty interesting episode. So buckle in, buttercups. We're going to be talking about the devil made me do it. I started off looking for various cases on this and people who have used this as a defense, but I came across a very interesting case on this, and we'll get to that later. But criminal defendants tend to have an excuse or rationalization for their allegedly criminal behavior, especially if the particular defendant has never been in trouble with the law before. Even as they are being arrested, they are giving the arresting officer their explanation of why they acted in the way the officer alleged they did. Many of these defenses do not hold much legal water, however, and will not result in the outcome desired by the individual. Here are some of the more popular defenses that simply don't work. I didn't know he or she was that young. Sex offenses committed against juveniles are constantly making local and national headlines. Invariably, some of the individuals charged with committing crimes against young children will attempt to argue that the child either did not look to be underage, or the child told the offender that he or she was a different age than the child actually was. This line of defense rarely works. He or she didn't say no. While we're discussing sex offenses, let's turn to unwanted or forced sexual act, or sexual intercourse, sexual assault, and or sexual battery. An offender may attempt to shift a blame for the alleged criminal act to the alleged victim by claiming the victim did not clearly communicate that he or she did not want to engage in the sexual act, or he or she did not physically fight or resist when the sexual act begun. Neither defense is compelling. However, note that evidence suggesting the alleged victim did consent to the acts, text messages inviting the alleged defendant over for the purpose of sex, for example, can be powerful and effective evidence in a sexual assault or sexual battery case. But to the topic at hand, the devil made me do it. While insanity, mental disease, or illness can result in a favorable outcome to criminal charges, simply alleging that you were under the influence of a demonic power at the time you committed the offense may not, especially when you know that demonic voices or the devil are morally bad. What do you think about that? You think the devil can make you kill someone? Make you do something bad? You think demons can overtake and then have you do stuff? The devil made me do it. This has long been the plea of those who have been caught doing something wicked that is uncharacteristic of their usual behavior. Most of the time, we take it only as a figure of speech to brush off an aberrant deviation from the norm. However, sometimes that meaning can become all too literal. In 1981, a brutal murder occurred in a tranquil town on the east coast of the United States. A vicious crime that the perpetrator claimed was not carried out by his own hand, but rather that of demons that had taken him over. It was a defense that would carry over into an actual court of law to become the nation's first case of a court defense seeking to blame a crime on demonic possession, and would trigger a media blitz of the spectacular tale of menacing supernatural evil on trial. The whole strange tale begins in the quiet, affluent, and peaceful neighborhood of Brookfield, Connecticut, where an unassuming family, the Glatzels, had arrived in order to clean and put in order a rental property they had recently acquired in the scenic town of 13,000. Shortly after they arrived, a series of bizarre events began to unfurl that would mark the beginning of the madness that would about to spiral out of control. One day, about a month after they had arrived, Mrs. Judy Glatzel reported that her youngest son, 11-year-old David, had suddenly and inexplicably fallen down rather forcefully onto the bed as if he had been shoved. When questioned about the occurrence later, David told his mother that he had been, in fact, pushed by what he described as an old man with burnt-looking skin, who had pointed a finger at him and growled the word, "Beware," before throwing him onto the bed. It was a strange story, to be sure, and at first the Glatzels wrote it off as the overactive imagination of a boy. But David had always been a very honest boy, and the situation would get progressively worse. He began to wake up at all hours of the night, sobbing uncontrollably, and when asked what had happened, he would describe how he was being visited in the darkness by an old man with soulless black eyes, animalistic features, sharp, jagged teeth, pointed ears, and hooves. David claimed that the intimidating entity was continuously warning him that if they moved into the rental house, they would be harmed. These visitations continued, and before long, were even occurring in the daytime. When David claimed the beast took on the appearance of an old man with a white beard, dressed in a flannel shirt and jeans, David said that sometimes the apparition would snarl in some foreign language or threaten to steal his soul. The spooky visitations also began to be accompanied by various unexplained phenomena throughout the house, such as inexplicable footsteps, slamming doors, and disembodied voices. The weirdness would not end there. David began to exhibit strange wounds such as scratches, cuts, and bruises on his body for no discernible reason. And his night terrors gradually worsened to the point that he would wake up howling in terror practically every night. The mother even claimed to, at one point, have even seen her son being choked by unseen hands or flopping about on his bed like a rag doll. David had also put on a large amount of weight in a short period of time, allegedly becoming extremely fat and putting on 60 pounds in only a few months. In light of the strange, seemingly paranormal events that were unfolding around them, the alarmed Glatzels took notice and become convinced that this was not a simple case for their kid trying to get out of household chores or school. They enlisted the assistance of a local Catholic priest from St. Joseph's Roman Catholic Church in Brookfield for guidance. The priest performed a ritual cleansing of the house, but it seemed to have no effect as the ominous phenomena continued. The increasingly desperate Glatzel family pleaded with the church for help and were referred to two demonologists and exorcists by the name of Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens arrived, seemed to mark an increase in bizarre events and aberrant behavior on the part of David. He began to have sudden seizures and fits or convulsions that required him to be restrained at times. He also would occasionally snarl, hiss, or spit at the people. And it got to the point where one person was always awake as David slept, in case he should experience one of his bizarre tantrums or seizures. The boy was also known to suddenly begin quoting passages from the Bible and Milton's Paradise Lost, or speaking in voices that were not in his own. It was even reported that he would speak passages in Latin, a language with which he had no experience. Lorraine Warren, a self-professed psychic, would later report that on at least one occasion she had seen a strange black mist congeal next to David. The boy also continued to repeatedly complain of being hit, shoved, or choked by unseen hands. After some time of these escalating bizarre events, the Warrens came to the conclusion that there was a malevolent presence in the house, and that David was most likely subject to multiple possessions. It was around this time that the Glatzels' 26-year-old daughter, Deborah, implored her fiancé, Arne Cheyenne Johnson, to move in with them in order to make them feel safer. In light of what they saw as demonic possession, the Warrens went about conducting a series of exorcisms in an effort to rid the boy of whatever malignant entities were residing within him. 3 exorcisms involving the help of no fewer than 4 Catholic priests were conducted, during which time David would growl, snarl, curse, spit, kick, and scratch like a madman, all to no ultimate effect. The Warrens also claimed that during the exorcisms, David would cease breathing for long periods of time, do rapid series of sit-ups despite his obesity, contort his body into unnatural positions normally not possible, and even levitate. The normally quiet and peaceful boy was also said to start talking of murder and stabbings, which further alarmed both the family and the Warrens. Eventually, the exorcists learned that there were 43 demons supposedly residing within David. When they asked him who was there during one of his episodes, and the boy gave 43 different names. The exorcisms did not seem to be having any effect. An evil presence within David garnered the nicknames the Beast and the Master. The family contacted Brookfield police in October of 1980 to report that they felt the situation was becoming dangerous and that the boy posed a potential threat. But at the time, they were largely ignored. Debbie's fiancé, Arne Johnson, was becoming exhausted by the whole ordeal and started taunting the demons that were tormenting David. He is said to have shouted at them on several occasions and to have challenged and commanded them to enter him instead. Johnson was reported to have repeatedly said on numerous occasions, "Come in to me." Oh, that's not good. Leave the little lad alone. During one of these times, he became terrified when he claimed to have seen the demons and even made eye contact with them as he looked into David's eyes. Something the Warrens has strictly warned him not to ever do. Not long after this, Johnson crashed his car into a tree, and while he was unharmed in the accident, he would later claim that the demons had taken control of him and caused him to crash. In November of 1980, Judy and Carl Glatzel took their son to a psychiatrist to see if there was anything that could be done to help the increasingly disturbed boy, or if any answers for his condition could be gleaned from the scientific community. The psychiatrist informed the family that David was normal, exhibiting only a minor learning disability. Certainly nothing to account for his escalating bizarre behavior. Nevertheless, they enrolled their son in a special school for disturbed children, hoping this would somehow cure him after all, else had failed. In the meantime, Debbie and Johnson moved out of the house to live in an apartment near the Brookfield Pet Motel. I was getting ready to say the pet cemetery. I don't want to be buried in the pet cemetery. But that's where Debbie had gotten a job as a dog groomer. See, pretty damn close there, guys. The manager and owner of the pet motel, as well as the landlord of the apartment, was Alan Bono, no relation to Sonny, would become friends with the couple. In the ensuing weeks, Debbie Glatzel became increasingly concerned as Johnson started to display strange, uncharacteristic behavior. The normally polite, even-tempered Johnson would become highly irritated at the smallest things and would suddenly go into bizarre trances, during which he would growl, snarl, or convulse, in which he claimed to have no memory of. During several of these episodes, he would shout out in the despair that you could see the Beast staring at him, after which he would once again claim he could not remember such a thing happening. These weird trances became more frequent and his behavior more erratic until Debbie started to fear that perhaps her fiancé had been possessed by the same demons that had been inhabiting her brother. Despite the fact that none of Johnson's co-workers reported anything out of the ordinary. On February 16th, 1981, tragedy struck. Johnson called in sick to his job as a tree surgeon. Whatever that is. Now I'm going to have to look that up. And joined Debbie and Bono for a lunch party during which they all reportedly drank heavily. So it sounds like it was a fake sick call. They wanted to go party all night long and rock and roll all day. I probably did that wrong, but whatever. After the party, they returned to the apartment to hang out, and at some point during the conversation, Johnson and Bono got into a heated argument. During the confrontation, Johnson allegedly went into one of his trances, after which he started growling like an animal, pulled out a folding 5-inch knife, and proceeded to viciously and repeatedly stab Bono, who would die at a hospital from his wounds several hours later. Johnson, who had no previous criminal record of any kind and had fled the scene, was apprehended several miles from the scene of the crime and was charged with first-degree murder. He claimed at the time that he could not remember anything of the incident. The case was already exceptional, as it was the first murder ever recorded in the history of Brookfield. But things would take a turn for the bizarre rather quickly. A mere day after the murder, Lorraine Warren made the claim that Johnson had been possessed by demons when the murder was committed, and that David Glatzel had said he had seen the demons go from him into Johnson's body. This was further given fuel when the family supported these claims, saying that the murder had been the devil's work, and that the beast had transferred into Johnson's body during the exorcism when he had taunted them to do so. These claims of demonic possession and murder in this quiet, sleepy town drove the media into a frenzy, and the story was covered extensively in various outlets. Making the whole affair even more mysterious was that although the Glatzels and Warrens talked about the exorcisms that had been conducted on David, the church itself went into great length to distance itself from these claims. The diocese officially stated that although he never touched a boy, a Father Vergulak and 3 other priests had indeed been involved in helping the boy through his affliction, it adamantly denied that no one touched his penis. That any actual exorcism had been performed. The spokesman for the diocese, Reverend Nicholas V. Greco, explained that the bishop's approval would have been required to carry out an exorcism, and that no such approval had ever been sought. This sat squarely opposite from what the Glatzels and Warrens were saying, and they claimed that such approval in fact had been granted after 2 of the younger priests had approached the bishop personally. Making matters more complicated was that none of the priests who had allegedly been directly involved in the exorcisms were permitted to comment on the incident to reporters nor investigators. And all of them were mysteriously transferred to other parishes. Things would get even more bizarre still when Johnson's trial came. His defense attorney, Martin Manella, decided to use the alleged demonic possession as an actual legal defense for his client. It would be the first time in the United States history in which this defense would sought to prove innocence by arguing demonic possession, and therefore a lack of personal responsibility. Media attention into the case reached a fever pitch, and the trial came to be known as the Demon Murder Trial and the Devil Made Me Do It Trial. Attorney Manella, for his part, extensively researched the feasibility of such an argument and found that such a defense was not unprecedented in the world. Manella put forth 2 cases from England in which the defense of possession had been allowed. One in which an arsonist was acquitted on the grounds of demonic possession, and another in which a rapist had received a suspended sentence for the same reason. The lawyer even made arrangements to have exorcists from Europe flown in for the trial. In addition, he was prepared to subpoena the priests that had allegedly performed the exorcisms on David Glatzel if they didn't cooperate. Manella vowed, "I'm going to show the guy isn't insane and that it's not a delusion. The courts have dealt with the existence of God, and now they'll be asked to deal with the existence of the demonic spirit." The trial commenced on October 28th, 1981 at Connecticut's Superior Court in Danbury. As expected, Manila entered a plea of innocence on the grounds that his client had been possessed by demons that had passed into him from David, and as such had not been in control of himself, therefore releasing him from the responsibility of any wrongdoing. During the proceedings, alleged taped evidence of the priest confirming approval for an exorcism was presented, as well as lurid photographs depicting scenes such as Johnson kneeling over David on the floor with a crucifix pressed to his forehead, and another in which Johnson is holding the boy down as his crucifix lies broken on the floor next to him. Despite this, presiding judge Robert Callahan was not convinced, and he disallowed this argument, stating that none of it could be objectively or scientifically verified through the available evidence. How do you verify someone's demonically possessed? As a result, all of the testimony related to the demon possession defense was thrown out. The jury was not permitted to consider it as a viable reason for the murder, and Manila was forced to change his tactic, changing his stance to that of self-defense. After 3 days of deliberations, the jury came to the conclusion that Johnson was guilty of first-degree manslaughter, and he was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison, of which he would ultimately just serve 5 years. In the aftermath of the trial, media interest in the case waned, but the story was not over yet. In 1983, Lorraine Warren helped Gerald Brittle write a book about the incident titled "The Devil in Connecticut," which many saw as a cheap attempt to make a profit off the Glatzel, Pretzel family suffering. But Warren insisted that the proceeds from the book would be donated to the family. The book was released in 2006, by which time David Glatzel, now an adult, and his brother Carl Glatzel Jr. sued the publisher on the grounds that they claimed it gave the family emotional distress, violated their privacy, and contained a good amount of libel. Carl further said that the Warrens had lied about the events that had taken place and that the exorcism story was a hoax. A tall tale had been weaved to take advantage and make profit off of David's mental illness. Carl also complained that the book had made him out to be the villain of the story because he had never subscribed to the supernatural explanations for what had transpired. For their part, the Warrens have stuck to their version of the events. Lorraine Warren has repeatedly insisted that the supernatural phenomena that occurred was real, and that all of the priests involved had agreed that the boy had been possessed by demons. Additionally, Debbie Glassell and Arne Cheyenne Johnson himself have to this day continued to assert that the Warrens' versions of events is true, further saying that the Glassell family is suing purely for monetary gain. The priests involved with the supposed exorcisms have never come forward to officially support either side of the story and continue to remain silent on this matter. So what do you make of this story? I know the Warrens. I don't know them personally, but I'm familiar with most of the shit they've done. I don't know if it's shit. Maybe they did help people. I don't know. Personally, I don't know. A lot of people call the Warrens a bunch of fakes or whatever. I don't know, because I wasn't there. I don't know what they've seen. I don't know what they've experienced. But considering the different versions of the events and the conflicting claims of all involved, it is difficult to say. Because really, I mean, what if mental illness is like, you know, when people are hearing voices, what if it is demons? I don't know. How do you explain the voice in your head? I don't know. There's a lot of things I don't know. There's a lot of things a lot of people don't know. There could be potential for some dark force to compel a rational person to commit evil deeds that would never imagine committing otherwise. And if so, should they be held accountable for it? Or is this all just some wicked element of the human soul, which occasionally bubbles up and frosts forth some murky recess of our psyche to drive us to these atrocities? And in the end, it is only us to blame for failing to be the gatekeeper that keeps the beast from getting out. Release the beast. Law has always had to deal with the fine line between sanity and insanity, accountability and absolution. Is there perhaps another line on which we teeter? The line between the deeds of our own mind and those of something other. It is unlikely that the defense tried during the Arne Cheyenne case will ever be admissible in court. But it can perhaps cause us to reflect upon the nature of an evil that potentially resides within one of us, supernatural or not. Personally, I don't know what to make of this. I still don't have solid evidence. I haven't had a ghost or whatever come up and tap me on the shoulder. I personally know I am responsible for all my actions. People do have impure thoughts. Some could be disillusioned, but is it supernatural? Is it something else? Is there something else talking to you? The human mind is boggling. There's a lot of boggling things out there. Is there life outside of the earth? Is there life after death? Or is it like a computer? You pull the plug and it just gets black. Regardless of it all, for the people that are listening to this podcast, I appreciate it. It means the world to me. We're coming up close to a year for this show. I keep doing it because people keep downloading. I don't know if they're actually listening or not. You got an idea for the show? Let me know. At The Sinful Show at gmail.com. That's sinful with a Y. Also, don't forget, we've been running our holiday sales at sinfulbynature.com. Again, sinful with a Y, sinfulbynature.com. Use the holiday code holidays 35 and you'll get 35% off your whole order. We've been running this and everyone's been taking advantage of it and taking money away from my beer fund. Because I've been having to drink cheaper beer because I've been selling products at a lower price. But anyways, stay sinful, my friends.